And now you start to get the point, you start to understand right away that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is no doubt the one who should be relied upon, the one whereby it's almost becomes an inescapable position, because there is no other doer, there is no other actor, there is no one. We gave a little example last night, even, and we went into a bit of depth. And for some people, it was a little bit tricky, but we said, can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can He provide the feeling of fullness without food? Yes, He can. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide the combustion, when something burns, without fire? Of course He can. And so all these things that you see, they're all the means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand that play. Nothing has an independent power or cause outside of Allah. That fire that was next to the cotton, you only saw the effect of the fire, but did the fire actually possess the independent power to burn? Or was it Allah who created the effect? And all you saw was two things together. That's all you got to see. So did the fire actually burn, or was it Allah who created the effect? And this is what they talked about. And the scholars have said, well, it's actually Allah who created the effect. Someone said, well, why is it then every time fire touches cotton, it burns? So this is Allah's practice and normal habit. When this is next to that, He creates the effect, but it is Allah who's creating the effect. So it's a very intricate point, right? But ultimately, you see the importance of it, and that how then can I escape relying on Allah, knowing that every amal, everything is from Him, and added to that, that He is the most merciful, all merciful, the generous, and the wise. How then? That's an inescapable position. So the second pillar of tawakkul, which is another very important pillar, it's the actual state of reliance. So in saying that the first one is having knowledge of the divine oneness, the second state is the state of reliance. So what does that look like? How is a person supposed to be? What does that state look like? What does that condition look like when a person is in that state of reliance? And what that means is that you leave every single affair you have to Allah, and you trust in Him to such an extent that your mind is at rest, and you resign it to Him. So you completely resign your entire affairs to Him, and you don't turn to any other than Allah in the first place. Now, it doesn't mean that you turn to Allah at the very end after you've exhausted all these means. It means that in the first place, from the very outset, from the very beginning, you do not turn to any other except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean you can't take with the asbab or you don't take with the asbab. Part of tawakkul also means having a respect for Allah's system, the system that He created. This is Allah's system. And so we have to respect that. But there's an internal state, an internal condition, which is where the heart's at. We're talking about the heart trusts Him. So the body, yes, it utilizes the means and the things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed before us, but the heart is at a point where it's trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it leaves everything, it assigns everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the very beginning, in the very first place. Now, there's an example that is given. It's like when you entrust someone to represent you before a judge. So you task somebody to become your representative before that judge. What does that person do? They are the most sympathetic to you. While everyone else might be harsh and hostile, this person is sympathetic to your cause. And this, that person is going to take care of you. You know that person is going to be the most protective, because you've assigned them to your case, and they're arguing in front of the judge for you. So you know they're going to look after you. You know that they have your welfare in the best interest possible, right? You know that to be the case. And on top of that, what you do is you sit quietly. You may sit quietly. Your heart's at rest. You know that this person, right, is going to take care of things. You know they're going to argue the best for you. You know that they're not going to shortchange you. So you know that to be the case. So the example of one who's having tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a person who assigns all his affairs to somebody, to a representative. before the judge. So you assign all your affairs to Allah, and you're at ease with that, and you're at rest with that, and you trust that this person is going to be the most sympathetic to your cause. And that's what you do. And so the one that you've entrusted is sufficient for you. And as we said last night, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, is Allah not sufficient? Is Allah enough for his abd? And so just like you appoint a representative, you deem that sufficient to preserve your interest. So how could we not then not deem that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not sufficient for our interest? So you see that a person leaving the affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a person who appoints a representative, and thereby they leave all those affairs to that person. And so whoever realizes, this is a very important point, whoever realizes that provision, life, creation, and all these various and divergent affairs are in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand. Once you realize that and you understand that, provision, your rizq. And subhanAllah, rizq, and as we said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will move. You imagine that Allah, he created, the ard. He created without an earth, that drop of water could not have reached you. So he created the earth, the samawat that needed the sun. Everything that you see to facilitate your rizq to get to you. It's not as simplistic as we enjoying. If you look at the countless, numerous, infinite things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done in order to place that drop of water in your mouth, it required the heavens and the earth. So imagine not being thankful just for the blessing of that. So that's why Allah says, eat and drink, wala tusrifu, but don't waste. Because if you waste, you're not thankful, you're not grateful. The whole heavens and the earth were created to bring you these provisions. So once you realize that no matter where you are, you could be here, you could be in the worst of places, you could be in the most destitute and poorest of places, but your provision will reach you. And that, when we talk about destiny, it was always destined to reach you. If Allah created the heavens and the earth just so that breath could be provided for you, right? Imagine, no matter where you are, you think geography will separate you from what Allah has assigned to reach you? Never, no matter where you are. So when you come to that realization that provision, life, creation, and every single affair is in Allah's hands, when you realize that and you come to that realization, you realize that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control and he has no partner, la sharika lah, that his generosity, that his wisdom, and that his mercy have no end. So when you come to realize all of these things, you also come to the realization that Allah's rahmah is without end. Allah's wisdom is without end, and Allah's generosity is without end. Look what Allah did and facilitated to allow you to be able to enjoy the thought of him. Look what he did. Just to enjoy the thought of him. Allah said to the malaika, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you don't know. And Allah knew that he was going to be creating a people who would enjoy the thought of him. He knew that he was going to be creating people whose hearts would find tuma'nina in him. But look what he did in order to affect that. Look how many things. So everything that we're on today, everything that has transpired, even the sending of the Prophet, look at the sequence. Even the sending of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We have the comfort of opening the Quran in front of us, but do we put that sequence in effect to see how it got to us? The hardship that it went through, the difficulty that it went through, the struggle, the mujahada that it went through. Look at the blessings. So subhanAllah, when we come to that realization, that provision, life, creation, all affairs in Allah's hands, we know that it is only Allah, la sharika lah, who has no partner, and that his rahmah, his generosity, and his mercy have no end, right? And his wisdom, they have no end. And that no one else's mercy or generosity is equal to Allah's. This is a very important statement. This is the crux of what we're talking about in tawakkul. This is the crux. So what happens then is that your heart necessarily, in other words, by default, It relies on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And your sight is cut off from anyone other than Allah. So when this happens, you no longer look to anyone else except Allah. You only see Allah, the effector of everything, the one who is causing, moving, doing. Khalas, there's only Allah. You only see Him. You see nobody else. Once you realize this, your sight is cut off from anyone other than Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? So this is the crux of it. Now, if your sight, if it's not cut off from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so let's say that people are looking to various things, the means and so on and so forth, then there's two reasons why that would happen. Two reasons, right? The first reason is that you have a weakness of certainty about the things that have been mentioned in tawakkul. So your certainty in tawakkul is not there yet. It's still weak, right? So you're still on that trajectory, inshallah. And, you know, there may be doubt in it. Maybe certainty hasn't overcome your heart yet, but there may be a factor there. The second reason is that naturally the heart is frightful and weak. So, you know, cowardice and boldness are two natural dispositions. A person can be very, so, you know, when you look at cowardice, it necessitates that a person is obedient to the whims. So if you said somebody is cowardly about something, then you would find that person obeying their whims most of the time, because it's easier to do that. It's not easy for them to be bold. It's easier for them to just shy away. And, you know, ultimately, this is what some of the things that the scholars have said in that regard. Because, you know, if you like, there is an example that is given. A person could be afraid, for example, of sleeping with a corpse in a house, even though they realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never revive it. But you see that just in an example. So sometimes it's easier, but to succumb to the whims than anything else. Anyway, so that's the crux of what we said in terms of tawakkul. And if you see other than Allah, it's because either some of those weaknesses or possibly due to the heart being naturally frightful and weak. All right. So we're going to talk about now, it's the last point that we're going to mention. We're not going to go too much longer, inshallah, but this is probably the most important, the important aspect of understanding tawakkul. That was the crux of it, but this is probably the most important aspect. If a person then realizes, so a person then realizes that reliance or tawakkul is an expression, it's an expression, as we said, of a condition of the heart. So tawakkul is an expression given where your heart is at. Where's your heart at? There's an expression of it. That's tawakkul, right? But it, you know, if we said that it comes off from an expression, as we've just said, from a condition, the one that we've just described, and you have that confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the true disposer of all affairs, and you refrain to looking at anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you have that, right? So a person, we know that you realize that expression, it comes from that condition of the heart, concerning that you have that confidence in Allah. You're not looking at any other agent, you're not looking at any other being. So there is that level of tawakkul. You're refraining from looking at any other being. You only look towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there are 3 degrees of that. There are three layers or 3 degrees of whereby a person can be at, right? So we're effectively talking about tawakkul, but now we're talking about the levels of tawakkul. So you've reached the level of tawakkul. You don't look to anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a doer, the effector, the one who does, the one who is doing. You don't turn to anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know He is the only agent. There are 3 degrees of tawakkul now. You're in that state, but there are 3 degrees. What are the degrees? Let's look at what they are. The first degree is the first one that we have mentioned already, which is like somebody representing you. You know, like imagine somebody is representing you before a judge. They're entrusted with whatever situation you have. You are convinced that they will guide you in the right way. You are convinced of their ability, and you are convinced of their sympathy, that they have your best interest at heart. So that's the first degree, which we've already explained. The second degree is much stronger than the first. And the second degree is about it, or it's like or comparable to the state of a little boy. So you imagine a little boy runs to his mum, and immediately he has his confidence in his mother, and he's running to tell her about something that happened. Well, we see this all the time. Whoever's got children or brothers or sisters or whatever the case may be, we see this all the time. There is no even thought of tawakkul at all. There's no cognition of it. That child runs to the mother, and there's not even a cognition whatsoever of reliance. They just immediately run to the mum to tell the mum about what happened, or what situation they just witnessed, or what event just happened. They fell, or they ran into something, and so on and so forth. So the person, not even do they have a thought, not even are they devoid of a thought of tawakkul. They're not even aware of that young boy is not even aware of his reliance, because it doesn't even occur to him. So they're not even thinking of the concept of tawakkul. They just go, right? They just go. And there's no deliberation. There's no thought. I just went. And that's a level and a degree up from the first level, because the first level required thought and cognition that I'm relying on the lawyer, or I'm relying on this representative. Whereas this one required no cognition whatsoever. It required no thought whatsoever. It required absolutely nothing. It's just an immediate go, and there was no thought about it. There was no deliberation about it. There was no even thought of tawakkul. It's just that was the first point. That is the second degree of tawakkul. As for the third degree of tawakkul, which is the highest degree of tawakkul, is that a person, right? Is that a person be in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand like a corpse, right? In the hands of the one who is washing him or her, right? Absolutely in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands, like a corpse being washed by the person who conducts the washing, right? Not like the little boy. This is different now. Not like the little boy. Because the little boy cries and will cling to his mother's hand, right? His mother's hand. And the little boy, he knows, right? Very smart, or little girl. If he does not cry, if there's no tears, right, at all, then his mother's not going to seek him out. If you're just playing with his toys, or she's playing with her toys, there's no need for me to carry the child. I say that all the time. You know, my youngest is playing, and then the older kids will come and they'll want to carry them, and then I'll make them cry. I say, don't leave them. If they're playing, leave them, because then you're just making them cry for nothing. And if they're settled and they're okay, there's no need. So if the child doesn't cry, there's no need for the mother or father to pick them up, right? And if the child doesn't cling, if he's not clinging, right? She's not going to carry the child. And if he doesn't ask for food to drink or something to eat, right, then she's not going to feed him either. So unless he's hungry, or unless they complain about it, normally they're not going to initiate that type of thing right away, right? So you see that this is quite different. This is quite different. It's a level up. So this person here that we're talking about in this third degree is in reference to, right? This person is in reference to Allah, right? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's effectively having no choice. This degree is you have no choice, because you absolutely know that you are subject to the qadr of Allah. So here you have no choice. The boy had a choice. Here you know you have no choice. You're subject to the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so no outlet whatsoever remains, right, to wait for what takes place with him. So you know immediately that there's nothing that can come to your assistance, nothing that can help you except to wait for what's going to happen. This is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like that corpse, you're being taken to the qabr, you can't do anything. All you can do is wait, and all you can do is trust, and all you can do is say, this decree is upon us, and I am subject to it, and I am completely and utterly in your hands. Like a corpse subject to the hands of the washer. I can't do anything. I'm subject to the qadar. That's it. And I'm ease with that. So that is the third degree of tawakkul. Now, I should add here, and I know people might want to ask questions on this. This third degree of tawakkul, when you're there, it is said by some ulama that it precludes, meaning that it prevents supplication and request. In other words, it almost like puts you in a situation, because when you are in a state whereby you see things through the vision of qadar, then people are even in a state where they wouldn't even make dua. They said that if you're in that state, according to some, like the likes of Ghazali, he said it precludes dua and request. In other words, you wouldn't even make a request. You just leave everything to Allah. But not in the first two. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. I'd rather you not ask questions on that. That situation in terms of the third part, which involves the third degree, involves qadar. So the first one, you entrust somebody. It's like you entrust somebody. So you trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know that Allah has your affairs at heart. He's sympathetic, and he will do good by you. You believe that. We know that to be true. That is true in and of itself, irrespective of what you believe. But you're at the point where you know that to be the case. So you have knowledge of that. The second one is when a person cries, like a little boy crying to his mother. There's not even a thought. There's not even a thought of tawakkul. So there's not even a thought of tawakkul. Allah is the first point. I'm just going, right? It's like that. And the third one, complete subject to qadar. It's happening. I'm subject to it. Taslim. And there's a good example about this. And let me give you a good example about this. A good example is the example of our lady and mother, Aisha radiallahu anha, when they accused her of wrongdoing. And what did she say? She said, radiallahu anha, because the Prophet alayhi salam, he'd received no information about that, but he knew that she was pure. And he said that he knew, because no one had heard anything negative about her. And the Sahaba said, we have never heard anything about your family. She come from a pure family and whatnot. But he had no wahy. There was a rumor. And he said, Ya Aisha, if that. And she said to them, if I say that I did it, you'll believe me. And if I say that I didn't do it, you won't believe me, and so on and so forth. She said, all I have is Allah. Salamtu amru ilay. I resign my matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. I'm in his hands. And Allah revealed 10 verses in her name. And she used to, subhanAllah, be proud of that in the good way. She used to say, I was given 10 things no other woman was given. No other woman was given. And she used to recount them always. So you see the point that's that level of tawakkul that a person has in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so another question. Aisha radiallahu anha had utter tawakkul. She also cried so much her parents thought something bad would happen to her. What do we say about the interplay between emotions and tawakkul? Do feelings of fear and sadness, etc., mean someone lacks tawakkul? It is human nature to feel these things. No, just because a person took with the asbab or even recounted some things that have happened, it's not a taken away from tawakkul. Absolutely not. So you could still tell someone about it. You could still feel bad about it. You could still feel emotional about it. It doesn't mean that it's not a state of tawakkul. Just look at, for example, when the Prophet ﷺ lost his son Ibrahim. Do we say that, where did that come from? That came from his rahmah. And don't forget, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you these emotions. We're not robotic. We're not people without emotions. We have emotions. If Allah wanted to make us like that, where we didn't feel, He could have made us like that, but He didn't make us like that. He made us such that we are feeling, thinking, perceptive human beings. So we have to feel it in as much as we can feel it. Absolutely. This is a state condition of the heart. So even though my eyes can, and that's what the Prophet said, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْمَعُ وَإِنَّ الْقَلْبَ لَيَحْزَنُ. The eye certainly it tears and the heart becomes saddened. So there is no question that that if I have tawakkul, that's not shaken or if you like removed. That state isn't removed because I engage in my feelings. No. If we are saying that Allah is the creator of all actions, even murder, yes, correct, absolutely correct. He has to be. Why? Because you can't do a thing in Allah's kingdom without Him approving it. But there's a difference, Ahmed, between Allah's happiness or pleasure and between His anger. So Allah, He created the act because you wanted it, and He allowed someone else to be a recipient of that act, but He was not happy with what you have done. And for that, you will be brought to account. So just because bad things happen in the world and Allah allowed them to happen, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with what was done. Allah is angry with what was done, and He detests the things which He has forbidden and made unlawful. But nonetheless, the fact that He has made human beings free, willing human beings to some extent, and that's within a scope. We don't have absolute free will, but free will enough to be tested. That means that there has to be an external manifestation that He has to provide because He made us that way. And that's His wisdom. And we don't blame Allah in any way, shape, or form. We say there is absolute wisdom in what He's done. Now, we can't know the wisdom of everything. I can't sit here to say, and recount the wisdom of why certain things happen and bad things happen. I can't. But what I do know in terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that everything He does, there is wisdom in it. That's what I do know. And so ultimately, He is the creator of all actions, but if they're bad, His anger is attached to it, not His rida. So that question, again, just that question, He is the creator of all actions, murder included. How does that fit with free will? That's how it sits with free will. So I'll tell you, I'll state it for you very, very in a summarized way. Human beings have free will. And so basically they can choose something. Now, sometimes a person can select an action and someone will be the recipient. So they'll receive something they didn't select. It's like, for example, if I was playing, a game once and somebody hit a ball and then it struck me. So that was their decision to strike. And I was the recipient, which had no choice in being struck. So sometimes a person can make a free selective choice and another person will be the recipient. Now, that person who was the recipient had no choice. That's not what we're talking about here, right? We're not talking about a person being the recipient of the action. We're talking about free choice. So you had free choice. You inclined to do something and you inclined to do something bad, even to the extent of murder. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not happy with that choice. He's not happy and He detests that choice and it's not connected to His rida at all. But He gave you free will. And if we said that Allah stopped every act of murder, that means that He has to shut down free will for people. And that's not how He designed the world. He designed the world such that people have free will. So therefore, there has to be a manifestation to their free will. There has to be, if you like, an embodiment of what they choose. So He creates that for them. But that act, which is an unlawful act, a detestable act, an act which is so criminal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised great punishment for those who fulfill such an act, like murder. Even though that is the case, but He creates it for them because it's an embodiment of their free will, but He detests it. So it's not attached to His pleasure. It's not attached to His love. It's not attached to His mercy. It's not attached to any of those things. Rather, it's attached to His anger. It's attached to His displeasure. So we can't say that I can create an act devoid of Allah's power. No. Every act that comes into fruition and comes into this world, into existence, I should say, is by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing can happen in His kingdom without Allah's doing, without Allah's being, without Allah's willing and creating that. But not everything is attached to his pleasure. And the unlawful things are attached to his wrath and to his anger. So that's a very, very important point to make in that regard. So just the question, is it blameworthy if you get to the state of complete tawakkul during a trial, as opposed to at the beginning of the trial, and learn through the process to reach the state of tawakkul for future events? I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will give us, we may fail in some of those trials in what we said at the very beginning, and learn from it for what we would say in subsequent trials that come. So no doubt that yes, we are failing, human beings who are deficient most of the time in our decisions, and we are going to fail and we are going to fall. But it's important that we take the lessons from those failures and from those errors. So sure, a person might not have demonstrated complete and perfect tawakkul or patience or thankfulness at the beginning of an event or an act of something that occurred, but then learn from it and learn how to act later on. It may be that the first time you ever heard of someone passing, the first words that you may have said may not have been inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, but then you started to say that, and you started to affect that, and you started to bring that into your world. And now, no matter what the situation is, the first thing that is upon your tongue is inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And so Allah, he teaches us through these things, and we learn. But it's important to be on that trajectory and be moving in that direction. Sure, through the hardships, shaitan will cast thoughts at you to try and muddy the waters, if you like, and bring these thoughts about that there's no wisdom in what's happened. I should ask you the question: when you thought those things, how did it make you feel? How did that make you feel? Now, because if you hated those feelings and if you hated those thoughts, well, this is a step. This actually means it's iman. We were talking about a hadith last night. I mentioned it to some of the students, and it was about a man who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was suffering thoughts, and he had doubts, and he said to the Prophet, I get thoughts that, he said, I'd rather be burnt to charcoal or sawed in half than tell you what they are. And the Prophet said, really, you get those thoughts? He said, yes. And the Prophet said, that is iman. That is faith. Now, someone could ask the question, well, how on earth can that be faith? How can it be faith that I get these doubts that, they cause me so much angst and anxiety and maybe even depression? And, even being afraid about faith and being afraid about, things, just about anything. Do you know why the Prophet said that was faith? Do you know why the Prophet ﷺ said that is iman? The Prophet said that is faith and that is iman because you hate those thoughts and because you have deep ghira and jealousy over your faith and you want to protect it. So you hate those thoughts. You don't like them. And the only reason you hate them is because you love faith and you want faith and you don't want anything intruding on that special thing that you have. So because those thoughts intruded, you're trying to protect. And when the Prophet said to the man, really, you get those thoughts? He said, yes. He said, that's iman. Why? Because you hate that. You have a ghira, a protective, reflex that wants to shun anything that tries to intrude on that faith aspect or belief that you have. And you hate that. And so the fact that you got those thoughts and you receive those thoughts and you hate it, this is faith because you want to protect your faith at all costs. You don't like seeing them. You don't like hearing them. You don't like. But what is happening is that Iblis, al-mal'oon, what he's doing, he doesn't have anything left. So what does he do? He casts everything at you. He throws the kitchen sink at you. Everything possible he will try and fling at you because he wants to see you first and foremost doubt your faith, and so on and so on and so forth. So you feel these pings, if you like, as it brings you to doubt and brings you these feelings, makes you doubt your faith. But just because you have an image of something doesn't mean it's real. And the image is not harmful. Let me give you this. You have a dream that you're stuck, for example, in mud, or you have a dream that you're trying to run away from something in your dream and you're moving so slowly you can't get away from it. Or you have a dream, that you want to make salat, but you're not in wudu. And so you need to make wudu, for example. But that image does not reflect reality. And the moment you wake up, it doesn't reflect reality. Just because you envisage something does not reflect your iman. Just because you picture something does not mean that is the state of my iman, right? The state of your iman is pristine, and we know that to be the case. You have it there because it worries you. And that worry is the fact that I am so protective over my faith that anything that tries to intrude, right? It's like this. It's like my child. I want to preserve everything about what my child hears, sees, learns, and whatever. So if I see anyone that I don't approve of try to talk to my child, I become so sensitive and so, up in arms. Why? Because I know that person is no good for my child and I want to preserve what's pure, right? So I just sort of distance him, not to go there and whatever. You see the point that that's iman, that's faith. You're jealous over it. You're protective over it. You want to have it. And so to worry about it, those thoughts that came in is actually a sign of faith, which is what the Prophet was saying, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's very, very important to understand, right? And I'm not going to allow anything to enter whatsoever. And I think that point that I mentioned at the very end, the image does not reflect reality. Look at the reality. The reality is I love faith. The reality is I love Allah. The reality is I love Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. I love them. I love Allah and I love Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And look at this. A person will come and say, where's the wisdom in it? Or shaitan or iblis will impart a scruple. Where's the wisdom in it? Where did that thought come from? But you know, look at what the belief is. You know there's wisdom in it. That thought caused you angst, but that thought wasn't from you. That thought came from elsewhere. You know absolutely there is wisdom in it. But shaitan will impart those quick thoughts. Where's the wisdom in it? But you know that there's wisdom in it. So just because you have an image of something doesn't mean that it's actual. It doesn't mean that it is the case. It doesn't mean that is the state of faith. No. And I think that's a very, very important point to make. Can someone with anxiety possibly find some relief from having greater tawakkul, or are they unrelated? No, they're not unrelated. No. I mean, obviously, having anxiety, you can find greater relief in tawakkul. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And anyone who first heard me say on day one, look, if anyone who has anxiety, if anyone who has things that they need to talk about, seek out somebody to talk to them about. Seek out a professional, seek out a counselor, a psychologist, a friend. Seek out somebody. You can talk to somebody. Like I just said in this talk, seeking out somebody is not contrary to tawakkul. I may need help. I may need to unload. I may need that. And so just because I seek someone out does not mean that I have given up my tawakkul. No. And what you were saying there, yes, having that anxiety, having greater tawakkul could lead to that. But I would also advise that you do talk to somebody. If depend on your anxiety, if it's mild, medium, severe, wherever it's at, I always encourage speaking to somebody about it, and then see where you go from there. And there's no harm in doing that. What if your complete tawakkul makes you think you have become feelingless or numb? You have to add to that. I'm just trying to get my head around. There's a few ways I can tackle that, but you need to know. That was a comprehensive answer. Jazakallah. Thank you for. I hope that answer about the doubt. I hope it's important. And look, it's one of those things. I hope you took notes on, and I would love if you made a mind map for yourself that you can always come back to and reflect upon in the future, because you never know when these things are going to come out of left field and try and attack you. Anyway, is it a sign of low iman to be terrified of death? Well, we know that death is coming, and you know, I will tell you what the Prophet alayhi sallam said to Aisha radiallahu anha. She said that we love to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we are afraid of death. And he said, you've misunderstood, because when a person is going to die, Allah shows them something and they love to meet Allah and Allah loves to meet them. And there are some that the people who don't have faith, that Allah shows them something and they hate to meet Allah and Allah hates to meet them. And so it's not low iman, that's rather your fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not a sign of low iman. But I would increase my knowledge about that. And I'm going to talk about death, inshallah. I'm going to talk about death bi'idhnillahi tabarak wa ta'ala. I have to, because I'm trying to do as much as I can from Ghazali's Ihya Ulum ad-Din. And so ultimately I will be talking about death, which was his last chapter that he spoke about. All right. If you leave it all to Allah's will and qadar, how does dua play a part in that? I got to come back to that. I got to come back, because it needs a comprehensive answer, that one, and we don't have time to. We don't have a lot of time to do it. But to say that a person should make dua as a ibadah, but not in the form of a request, if that makes sense. Because when you understand qadar, you know, look, let me just give you this. Keep making dua. Right? Keep making dua. You're not at that level. And it's not an insult. I don't know who you are. I mean, I know you asked the question, but I don't know what your name is. Keep making dua. Dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, call Allah by his names. So keep making the dua. Don't ever stop making the dua. The dua is very, very important to make, and Allah loves it when you call the dua. All right. Your lack of reaction when things happen, because you know all is in Allah's hand, can sometimes feel that I'm detached. Don't call out my name. Okay, I won't call out your name. Okay. So a lack of reaction when things happen because you know it's in Allah's hands. I mean, it's not that you're detached. It's not that a person is detached because you know it's in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. And it doesn't mean that you feel that you're numb and you have no feelings. No. I mean, that is actually a level of where you're at. Can one cover Ihya alone, or must he study under a sheikh? Better to study al-Ihya under a sheikh. Even it's advised by many ulama to study under a sheikh. There's many things that you come across that may confuse you, but some things you can definitely, if there's an explanation of al-Ihya, then sure. And some things you could come across that you just love. It just depends. Like if you love to read Ghazali and that's your cup of tea, then so be it. But generally speaking, better if you had someone to guide you through those difficult aspects. All right. So I've got a question. Okay, I don't know where that question is. All right. I don't know where that question is. Hamad? I can't see it here. Okay. How does one's actions that is a creation, God's acceptance that is not created, come together when his actions, will, and power is beyond his creation? I know you have answered this, but I need it again. How does one's actions, that is a creation? Okay, so how is person's actions, which is a creation, correct, and God's acceptance correct, that is not created, come together when Allah's actions and will and power is beyond his creation? Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating something through his power, just because we're a creation. So let me put it to you this way. You're just going to open up a lot of doors, but I'll say it anyway. All right. I'll say it anyway. Just because Allah, he looks upon something created that exists in time like us, doesn't mean that that his side of it is created. So even though he is looking at something created, doesn't mean that that vision of what he's looking at is created. Just because Allah created doesn't mean that his ability became created or creation. There is an attachment that attaches to the creation that stems from his ability that occurred in a time. And that is the aspect, the attachment in the dunya. But his ability and his attribute is uncreated. I can give you more on that if you ask me in private, inshallah. Isn't it the case Allah only decides 3 things for us? Date of birth, date of death, and our rizq, where everything else is based on our free will and actions. Example, does Allah not choose our spouse? No, Allah does not choose your spouse. We do based on our free will. No. Allah does not choose your spouse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts your decision of who you want to marry. But marrying and choosing that spouse is within the range of your free will. So you choose the spouse, and it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he accepts, he accepts. And that's how it is. That's within your range of free will. And it's not only your date of birth, your date of death, and your rizq. There is much more to that. Much more to that than just what you're thinking. So, for example, take for example, not only your date of death and your date of birth, what happened, to all those good things that he inspired you to. When you went to the mosque, didn't he aid you? Didn't he help you? Didn't he assist you? Didn't he impart a will within you and a desire within you that allowed you to see that it was good for you? And when you looked at something unlawful, didn't he place that in you to state that it wasn't good for you? All these things that have been happening our whole lives. Maybe, Yahya, inshallah, maybe. I'll be talking to you soon through Rawi. Okay. Last question. A lot of people say my spouse is already decided for me. Is it nasib? So it will come when it comes. Isn't that thinking incorrect? Look, your nasib, I know they talk about it as your nasib, but they can only say it's your nasib after. Like, I'll give you an example. I can't see a person on the street and say that person is my nasib because it hasn't happened yet. If I marry that person and then I say, well, she was always meant to be my nasib, but I can't say that before. Now, when you talk about it in like an after effect, that's okay. Like, my nasib is out there somewhere, like as an after thing. Okay, if you said that in general as an after thing, but not as though you know who it is. No, you can't talk like that. So destiny, we say something was destined to happen, but we can't say that before it happens. We can only say that after it happens. All right? Okay. Last question. But who comes into your life is not your choice, right? So you're really not choosing. Well, it is. Look, you're part right and part wrong. Part right and part wrong. So someone comes into your life, someone knocks your door, and they knock your door, right? Now, you were a recipient of somebody else's choice. You didn't choose in them and say to them, come knock on my door and ask for my hand in marriage, unless it was prearranged. But they came and knocked on your door. You're a recipient of somebody else's act. So they knocked on your door. Now, that wasn't your choice. That was their choice. You were a recipient, but it was your choice to accept or not. You see that? So you either choose to accept that proposal or you reject that proposal. That's how it works. All right? Jazakallah. Okay, good. I'm glad you're happy with that.